has been the worst adult tantrum you've seen? Story 1. Jury duty for county court around 2000. I was in the selection pool for a murder trial. I didn't get picked for the trial, but this one skinny middle-aged man in a nice suit did, and immediately said, "No, I don't have time for this. Don't you know who I am, Judge? No." Angry man, I'm local used car dealer. Judge: So, angry man, I'm very busy and very important, and I don't have time for this. I'm local used car dealer. The judge called him back to chambers, and after a few minutes, the angry man sheepishly took his place in the jury box. Never thought I'd see a juror flip out in court. Story 2. I work as a news reporter in a small town. A lady went on a racist tirade of some sort and then committed some crime, relatively minor, legally speaking, criminal trespass or something, I forget, but it wasn't like a felony or anything, but she is one of those big fish in a small pond types. Has one of those last names that has always made her life easier. Rules have never really applied to her the way they do to normal folks, so she called the office, throwing a fit and demanding we remove her from the police reports before we printed them, and threatening us with lawyers if we didn't. She was very sure we needed her permission to print her name. That's not how any of that works, because it's public information. We don't need her permission to print her name. She, happened to be the very first entry in that week's police reports though. Story 3. I am an attorney and see them literally daily, but the worst one I saw was while negotiating a settlement for a client. His case was already not great, but the other side supplied me with evidence that made things way worse. I still managed to get an offer well into the six figures. He threw a hissy fit complete with ripping out his hair and holding his breath, threatening to asphyxiate himself, insisting that he deserved millions of dollars, which wasn't even legally possible in the kind of case this was. Story 4. My dad, in a T-Mobile store, losing his mind and threatening the staff because he couldn't do something on his phone and blamed the store manager for doing it on purpose. Reader, he up his phone at home. Story 5. Worked at a Walmart pharmacy when I was in pharmacy school. We had this lady come to pick up a prescription, but I think she had new insurance or something, so we had to rerun under the right insurance to get the correct price. We told her it would be a few minutes and we'd call her when it was ready. After we finished, we called her name, but she didn't respond. This happens a lot and we figured she probably went shopping, but I guess she was on the bench and just didn't hear the girl calling her name. After a few minutes, she goes up to the counter and asks why her medication wasn't ready. The girl at the counter, who was Filipino, but could have passed for Hispanic, told her we did call her, but she didn't respond. This set her off. She started screaming at this poor girl and kept talking about how she was lazy because she was Mexican and how the Mexicans are destroying this country and so on. The girl told her that she was actually Filipino. The woman said that's even worse. She said the Philippines was a country of whores and all Filipinos are whores, and the girl was and on and on. Our assistant manager tried to calm her down, but she kept screaming. Finally, the assistant manager banned her from the pharmacy and called the store manager to ban her from the store. It was the craziest meltdown I've ever seen. Story 6. Military officers or retirees who come in to get a new military IDs without an appointment and need one made on the spot. The people that work in the front office are enlisted. We've had retired officers throw a fit thinking their rank still means something and need to get preferential treatment. When they don't have an appointment, they ask to see our commander like they are going to get their way. They start raising their voices and yelling why they can't be seen. Guess what? Deers is down face. We have a button to silently call security forces if they start threatening anyone in the office. This tells you this happens more often than it should. Military officers are a bunch of entitled children that cry and make a scene when they can't get their way, the retirees being far worse. Story 7. My mom threw a full water pitcher at my head in a hospital room. She was a drunk and having a fit because she was not competent to be discharged. I didn't get hit and just walked outside to breathe. The nicest nurse came out and was kindly talking to me while I calmed down. Story 8. When I was 19 or 20, I worked in a bank. A couple around 40 years old came in with their 10-year-ish son. They had opened an account when he was born with something like 20. After 10 years, they expected there to be tens of thousands of dollars in there due to interest. Literally said as they were waiting for me to look up the account, I bet there's at least 10,000 in there now, for a savings account with 0.02 interest. But the account charged a monthly 5 maintenance fee for any balance less than 50. I might not remember the amounts exactly, but you get the idea. So it had closed years before that. They lost their, both of them screaming at me that they wanted the bank president on the phone. I deserve to die, someone should blow up the bank, etc. One of them tried to climb over the counter to get at me, but they were both very large people and physically unable to pick a leg up that high. Thankfully, their son just stood there screaming a high-pitched, one-note scream over top of everything. The manager came out and asked them to leave, and they started screaming at her and threatening her too. It was absolutely wild. Story 9. A month ago, from a now ex-coworker. The gas station I work at has multiple signs around the registers not to take transactions. The registers ask you twice if you're on the phone when doing money orders and gift cards. There's even another screen that tells you to hang up if someone tries to do a transaction over the phone. Simple, yeah, don't take transactions over the phone. My 1-week-old daughter could figure that out. Not Rob. Rob couldn't figure that out. I get a voicemail later that night. Sounded so proud of himself because he figured it all out without help. Store support called and wanted me to test a system update by ringing up a pack of cigarettes and a 1,000 gift card. I wrote down all the prompt numbers they gave me and everything went through just fine. Just wanted to let you know. The day prior to this, there was a community message reminding us, yet again, that no transactions are to be done over the phone. Store support, law, government, or anyone will never call to perform a transaction over the phone. We have a binder where we put all these emails and messages for everyone to read and sign and ask questions on, basically a store bulletin board. Rob's initials were on that message. I sent a quick text to my boss telling her everything and I would be there in the morning with her to deal with this. We both show up before opening and Rob is in the parking lot waiting for us with this big boy news. He starts spewing everything that happened and oh my gosh, look at me figuring something out without help. My boss stopped him and simply told him he was fired. Out came the most 3-year-old tantrum a late 50s adult could throw. Huffing, feet stomping, banging his head against the glass in the door, the works, stomped off to his car and sped out of the parking lot. It's no surprise he's been fired from over 20 different jobs in his working life. Story 10. Once I was in Philly for New Year's and I watched some lady get in an argument with I assume her boyfriend. She thought the best way to win the argument was to jump in front of an oncoming box truck. Thankfully, they weren't going fast and hit the brakes in time, but I still remember that silhouette of her with her arms out in front of the headlights thinking I was about to see someone die. After she didn't get run over, she just went back to arguing loudly with the guy. Story 11. I used to work at a small cafe that serves coffee, sandwiches, soup, etc. A woman came in one day and ordered a sandwich on gluten-free bread. We had just run out, and I informed her. Well, I called yesterday and someone told me you had gluten-free bread, so why can't I get a sandwich? Me, I'm so sorry ma'am, we do carry it, but we're out at the moment, we'll have more tomorrow. I haven't eaten all day because I was going to come have a sandwich. Now you tell me you don't have gluten-free bread. This is unacceptable. I'm going to make sure everyone knows you false advertise. Me ma'am, again I'm sorry, it has been busy today and we ran out, that's all. We have other GF options, including desserts. If you'd like to look at the menu, no, I came here to have a sandwich and you falsely advertised your gluten-free bread. At this point, people are staring and she's pacing back and forth in front of the register. I am filing a complaint with the Better Business Bureau. You all just lie and trick people. Me, okay ma'am, if you don't stop, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. She just went and sat at a table in the corner. I don't remember if she ordered anything, but I'll never forget her losing her absolute over gluten-free bread. Story 12. Christmas Eve. Working in a high-end mall. The store is closed. Someone forgot to lock the outer door and a grown man is standing in the foyer, banging on the interior door and screaming that I'm ruining his Christmas because I won't let him in just to buy a few things. Sir, we are closed, you need to leave, lather rinse repeat. It's like 625 after a 6 p.m. closing time. We can't leave, because I can't go out there and lock the door and he will not leave. He ended up in cuffs doing the whole do you know who I am deal. Story 13. A customer once threatened to throw his liquid-damaged computer through the glass panels behind the Genius Bar. A grown man scream, cry, and headbutt the steel wall because I asked him if he had an appointment. Various assault threats. Lots of yelling. Threats of writing to Steve Jobs. People showing up to Genius Bar appointments absolutely shit-faced. I worked at the Genius Bar from pre-iPhone through 2013. I literally have 1,000 stories of all sorts of shenanigans. Not all of them are bad though. I did meet some very interesting people too. Learned a lot from that job. Probably more about people than I did computers in hindsight. Story 14. I was supposed to drive to a party with a friend of mine, but she was running late. I was getting impatient, so I told her I would drive myself to the place we were meeting and I'd just meet her when she got there. We are no longer friends. Story 15. My neighbor got upset at me about my relative picking up her car at night. He confronted me about it a few days later to say you at me about 50 times and with a few racist words for Asian people thrown in. He's picked a fight with every neighbor on our street who isn't white. Story 16. My ex at almost 45 years old, losing a game of pool, and a 70-year-old man with Parkinson's telling him not to worry about it. It's just a game. He almost punched the guy in the face, then started throwing pool cues on the floor while screaming and cursing. This was at a busy pool hall. He threw tantrums like this all the time, and would scream at me and tell me I was a freak because I didn't act like he and his brother did when I was upset. Story 17. My father, Christmas 1990-ish, had a meltdown because the mashed potatoes I brought to dinner had lumps. My then husband preferred lumpy spuds because I like to know where my mashed potatoes came from and tore into me, viciously letting me know I had ruined Christmas with my side dish. Story 18. I work in a bar that charges auto gratuity for groups of 6 or more people, which in my experience is pretty standard in the US. It's like 20 of the pre-tax total. A few weeks ago we had a group of 8 people come in. Everything is going fine until we drop off their checks. For context, they only had 2 rounds and each person paid for themselves, so even with gratuity each check was maybe 30. One of the women decides that she doesn't like that, complains to the server who explains that it's policy and doesn't budge. The woman goes to argue with another server, who also doesn't budge. Then she goes to the owner, who is bartending and drowning in orders. At that point I guess he of course moves to try and get her out of the bar because this is now assault, and then the rest of her party decides to get involved and turn the whole thing into a 10-person brawl. 3 people were arrested over like $350. Story 19. Seen a lot. Am law enforcement worst and dumbest is a guy who I got called for cause he wouldn't leave a hotel lobby. Basically dude rolled up to some shitty hotel at 3 a.m. drunk and got a room at noon. They try and kick him out cause it was past checkout. He is arguing that because he checked in at 3 a.m. he has till 3 a.m. the next day to leave. Staff explains that's not how it works. I explain no hotel works like that. My partner does the same. Dude is screaming and belligerent, still yelling his Stupid argument over and over as I continue to explain why he is wrong and why it doesn't matter anyway because the owner staff of the business said GTFO, and the law says you must now GTFO. Dude calls his mom on speakerphone to tell about the same thing, and she also argues that he's wrong and should leave, so he hangs up on her to keep yelling. 10 more minutes of us explaining that he needs to leave, and if he doesn't leave we will have to force him to leave. He bugs out and now we are fighting. He is arrested all for the silly charge of trespassing, all because he was a giant stupid baby who couldn't handle the fact that he was wrong. Story 20. I was working at a gas station up the mountain pre-COVID, and my coworker's kid comes in to buy alcohol, buys 3 single shots and leaves, comes back later that night. I didn't pay attention to the time yet and buys 2 more, comes back a 3rd time, buys 1 more, goes to the bathroom. Comes back claiming he dropped the last one in the toilet, fished it out, and threw it away. I sell him 1 more just to get him to leave and then go check the trash in the men's bathroom. Nothing but paper towels, so I text my manager, comes back again. This time I give him my manager's business card and tell him to call her. She tells him he's cut off, he drives away. Comes back 7 more times to try a bunch of different tactics to get me to sell more alcohol. The 12th time, he starts threatening me, threatening my job, and threatening my manager. Eventually, he leaves again and my manager calls the police. They come take my report, get the kid's number from my coworker, and he claims he's laying on his bed bare naked. They tell him to stay home and sober up. Thank heck he actually listened to them. That time, edit to the people who want to come in here and shame me for not calling the police while actively being threatened off. Story 21. Some dude at Dairy Queen, sitting with who I assume are his wife and son, went ballistic after finding out his burger had ketchup, threw it at the wall, and stormed out. Having that level of immaturity on its own is shocking. To do it in front of an impressionable young man that you should be getting a good example for is just appalling. Saddest part was his son, probably 11 to 13, saying sorry to everyone as they left in a hurry. Takes real character for a child to be more mature than his father. Story 20. I've also seen people my age smash their monitors and their cars. I personally have never thrown a temper tantrum since I was 5. Story 23. I saw a 30-ish guy in American flag board shorts and slugging from a can of Monster at 10:30 a.m. absolutely berating his mother in a motorized cart at Disney World. It was Mother's Day. Story 24. Last year we lived in a terrible roommate situation. The roommate was constantly throwing herself onto furniture, and she was a very large person and risked destroying the furniture with her doing this. I asked her to please stop throwing herself onto the couch and she had a tantrum over it. She started freaking out about how the couch was ugly anyway and that it shouldn't matter how she sits. I explained to her that her feelings regarding the furniture aren't relevant as it wasn't her furniture, she didn't pay any portion of the cost for it, and that she needed to be respectful and not ruin our things. She just continued to freak out about how worthless the couch was and no one would even take it for free to justify her behavior. She then went on to text me frequently for a few months, sending me long novels of texts going on about why I was wrong to refer to her behavior as a tantrum. It was unhinged, she wouldn't let it go. Living with her was living for my wife and I and our other roommate. She was an incredibly lazy and inconsiderate person. She was completely unhinged and expected us to clean up after her every mess while she stayed in bed all day. These tantrums occurred frequently. Once time we explained to her that we couldn't be cleaning up after her and asked her to please start cleaning up after herself after we discovered her bedroom was growing mold because she had trash piled everywhere. It looked like a landfill and she just absolutely refused to do anything to care for her space or help with the shared spaces. Asking her to clean up would lead to her claiming we were traumatizing her because we wouldn't accept she was disabled, but she was only disabled when it involved something she didn't want to do, so these tantrums were frequent. We had to kick her out eventually because it got to be too stressful to live with her. We also found out she'd been kicked out of roommate situations before for the same behavior. Story 25. This fall I ordered T-Bell on the app for pickup in the lobby. I walked a few blocks and the lobby was closed. Drive-through only, so walked up to the drive-through window and picked up my order. Guy in a minivan behind me started screaming at me, and when he got out of his vehicle to start a fight, the pipe that was in his lap fell on the pavement and shattered. I took a photo of the license plate and called the cops to report an intoxicated driver. Story 26. The one that comes to mind first was when I was working at Costco during the brunt of COVID. Those large walk-in refrigerated areas during lockdown were only allowed to have 3 to 4 people in it at a time depending on if it was the dairy or the produce area, and they had employees manning the area to make sure folks followed those regulations. I was on that station a lot, and most of the time during busy hours there'd be a line outside of the area for folks waiting for me to give the go-ahead for them to go in when other folks came out. One day while I was stationed there, one guy who was only wearing his mask over his mouth tried to go straight in despite it already being at capacity and there clearly being a decent but fast-moving lineup. I kinda stepped in front of him and said, "Sorry sir, only 3 in at a time, you're gonna have to wait in line." Oh dear God, did he lose his. He started spitting off how it was bullshit, he didn't have time for this, he shouldn't have to listen to regulations, it's all just a cold anyway and no one has ever actually died from COVID, and then to finish it off, he pulled his mask all the way down, and coughed in my face, all because I said he'd have to wait in line. I'm a peaceful people pleaser, so I didn't say anything more than "I understand you're frustrated sir, but you're still going to have to wait in line." This stamps his foot like a child, and takes off in another direction. I've never wanted to punch someone more in my life, anytime a customer starts a fight with a fast food worker for whatever reason. Story 27. I asked my boss to throw away an old box full of, and he told me to do it. I came back in the next morning and we were setting up and we had an odd color to run. He asked me where the box was and started flipping out. Screaming and yelling and dancing around, telling me all kinds of bad things and that I needed to ask him to do anything in the shop, never touch or do anything unless I ask first. He also did this if stuff fell over. A piece of paper flies out of a box and gets left on the ground unnoticed. Things going unlabeled and identical being swapped because I was new. This guy would blow his top like a powder keg if someone even batted an eye the wrong way. Really sounded like a little kid. Oh my god, WF, you just fed up big time, oh my god, WF. Waving his arms around like a big 60-year-old baby throwing a tantrum. Story 28. Saw a woman try to bring a barbell into the gym. The front desk peep tried to explain that this was not allowed. They had no way to keep track of who was bringing equipment in and out, and someone could walk off with one of their barbells for all they knew. Plus, they had plenty of barbells in the gym. The woman insisted she needed this one because it was a women's barbell and she was not strong enough to lift the men's barbell. There's a difference of 10 pounds between the two for what it's worth. Gym employee kept telling her that they had a woman's barbell already. She claimed they didn't. She was yelling and screaming and wanting to talk to the manager, and I just kept right on walking. Sure enough, they did have a woman's barbell. Pretty pristine cause I don't think anyone used it. Story 29. I was working for a professional haircare distributor, one of the top 5 brands in the US. We had run out of a specific product across all scopes. Customer who was a salon owner became insistent we hadn't, and that I was just with her livelihood. I wasn't, proceeded to knock over counter displays and shriek like a banshee that we had ruined her, then sent in her assistants throughout the week to harass me about it. Received 3 phone calls from her and numerous bad reviews on our online forum. Turns out the product had been discontinued for formula reasons. We restocked it the next month upon formula correction, and she carried on as normal moving forward. Story 30. I've seen a lot, but the worst one to happen to me specifically was when I was 18 and working at Abercrombie Fitch. I was folding some clothes in the back room and was pretty new to the gig, not trained on registers yet. I looked up into the front room at some of the cute girls talking and went back to folding. Accidentally. I guess ID looked right past 2 black women waiting at the register, where no one was. Suddenly, a pile of clothes hits me in the face and a woman in her 40s is shrieking at me about how racist I am. I immediately apologize and offer to get her someone to the register immediately, but she said no and kept screaming, demanding my manager. The manager walked up and had my back thankfully. As I explained, it was a simple mistake. Again we offered to ring her up, but she kept throwing clothes at me and exclaiming she wouldn't leave until I was fired on the spot. The daughter just kind of sat there and stared as I got screamed at and hit. I got sent to the stockroom but watched this woman on camera scream for nearly an hour about how she was going to sue Abercrombie for discrimination. It took security forever to get there and kick her out of the mall, still screaming about my racism. Story 31. When I was 21 I moved from Australia to be an assistant manager of a restaurant in Singapore. The manager of the restaurant was a 40-something man on probation from jail for torturing his maid. He made it very clear to me from my first day that he has zero respect for women. One day we were reorganizing the restaurant and he moved a table to an inappropriate spot, so I told him so. He completely snapped and started stomping up and down the area behind the counter, very loudly shouting, "I am the manager. I am the manager." It was very entertaining. Story 32. We had to deboard at O'Hare in Chicago back in 2021 because some dude threw a fit about having to wear a mask. Once we all got off the plane we all just kind of sat around and waited for more officers to arrive. The dude was having a massive screaming drunken tantrum about how they were ruining his kid's trip to Disney because now he wouldn't be able to meet them in time. I wish I recorded it. Story 33. I work at a weed dispo. My job is to card you, no card, no walking into the showroom. It's part of the regulations we follow in order to keep our license and be here to sell you weed in the first place. Carded a maybe around 70-year-old. He was furious. Demanded I tell him how old he looks. I don't play that game. I'm bad at JR and people are always offended. Besides, I have to card you no matter how old you look. That's a law. I explain that. He begins straight up stomping his feet and yelling at the top of his lungs for me to tell him how old he looks. I stop answering and just stared at him because at that point he either calms down or I hit the panic button. He left, huffing the whole time and never came back. Story 34. The worst adult toddler I ever had the displeasure of working with had too many tantrums to choose the worst. But here's one I can summarize briefly. She was the old miserable. My other child is estranged from me for no good reason. Parent of an adult with disabilities. A church lady version of Dolores Claiborne and Annie Wilkes. I was her child's case manager. To further set the scene I will tell you that my client was capable of more independence than their mother allowed. Having an old and out-of-touch mother impacted their outward appearance, making them more of an intellectually and socially limited Tina or Napoleon from Napoleon Dynamite. They had a part-time job and no physical disabilities. One day I received a call from the local police asking that I confer with this woman to have her demands met as they were overwhelmed by her. The problem was that someone's vehicle was blocking the sidewalk in her neighborhood, making it unsafe for her adult child to walk, and this was illegal as her child needed to walk for their blood pressure, and only that stretch of sidewalk was appropriate, and they were a client of my agency. I waited for further clarification. Apparently her neighbor, a physically disabled veteran, had a truck and the truck had a lift for his chair, and as it was a city the driveway was short so the truck stuck out a bit past his driveway. I had to schedule a meeting with her and upper management to convince her that this was a great learning opportunity for my client to learn how to maneuver around the vehicle and rejoin the sidewalk safely. We also stressed the importance of maintaining good relationships with neighbors, and this was an opportunity to demonstrate the Christian kindness and understanding we would hope the neighbors would reciprocate to her and my client. Story 35. Telly Savalas in the dining room at the Universal Sheraton. I was eating breakfast. I was there for a convention and he just went off, yelling and screaming at the staff. I have no idea what he was mad about, but he was livid. Story 36. I worked with a 45-year-old grown man who was almost brought to tears and quit his job because our bosses didn't tell him happy birthday when he got to work. Story 37. My first job, the first customer that made me cry. Context: this was both my first job. My parents were going through a divorce at the time, so I was about as raw in nerve as it gets. One Sunday afternoon, a woman came to my register to return something. It was the store's standard procedure to ask for an ID. When I asked, she immediately got defensive. "Oh, so you don't believe me?" Every time I tried to explain the store's policy, she steamrolled me. Her daughter was with her. She was mortified. I had to call a manager from a different department to back me up, which to her credit she did. But this was getting ever louder. I finally just took her daughter's license just to get her to leave. I was struggling not to cry by this point. As soon as I finished the transaction, I ran into the back, cried. Turns out, my mom was in line behind the Both she, the manager I called, came to the back to make sure I was okay. Story 38. My mom and my sister definitely. She is narcissistic and has a processing disorder and a fascination with money, etc. I'd been arguing with her non-stop since my son was born. She demanded 90 of my maternity pay off me in rent and still expected me to buy shopping once a week and takeaways gifts on top of that. One day we had argument. She insulted me, my son, accused me of sleeping around, and she cornered me upstairs while my 3-month-old was calling out to me for food. I rung my older sister up for help, but she had her son taken off her due to how her partner treated him. I don't know why she encouraged my mom's behavior, as she would usually stick by me when my mom acted like this, but she encouraged my mom's behavior. So I left. I had to leave my son while found a place to stay, and when I found one 5 hours later, she refused to give him back. The police wouldn't do anything, so in the end a social worker had to convince her to give him back to me. Despite that she had huge tantrums and so did my sister, my mom literally smashed or grabbed back things for me and my son so I wouldn't take them. I got my friend to speak on my behalf to her and my sister. With me listening, my mom sobbed down the phone swearing, saying she'll take my son, and then put the phone down when my friend or I tried to talk. My sister just screamed like a banshee calling me a mum and tried ringing up all the extended family to make me an outcast. By the way, one's 48, the other's 29. Thankfully my grandparents didn't fall for it, and after a week they managed to get me to my paternal aunt's house. Meanwhile, according to my friends and brothers, my mum and sister went on a rampage, smashing up the house, telling everyone they came into contact with I was an evil person, referring to my son as my mum's, ranting on social media, trying to track my accounts, insulting my grandparents, my dad, everyone really. At one point even called up the police and social services UK's CPS to say I'm missing and my son was abducted and abused. The case was dropped after less than 48 hours. My aunt decided enough was enough. She had a degree, went to law school, was a professional doctor and uni teacher. She talked to both of them. My mum calmed down but still flares up occasionally. My sister, however, remains bitter. My grandma's mum died Christmas Day. Although I've been invited, I can't go to her funeral due to my mum's unpredictable behavior and my sister's attitude. Probably the longest tantrum ever still going on and the longest reply to this question, the middle of a family argument, that my father more than likely was the cause of. My father yelled at all of us and cancelled Christmas. I just shook my head and didn't care. Later it hit me, the lunatic wasn't saying Christmas was cancelled for the family. This loony meant Christmas was cancelled for everything. One of the first Christmases I spent alone, and for the first time it was a happy Christmas. Story 39. It was my son's birthday and the week before he moved out of state for his first real job. He, his father, me ex, his grandmother ex's mom and I all agreed to meet for brunch. There are 2 brunch places with almost the same name in neighboring towns. My son and I picked up my ex MIL and settled into a table. My ex showed up about 10 minutes late. He was at the other restaurant. He then proceeded to have a tantrum. It was embarrassing and of course took away from what should have been a celebration. I rarely communicated with him prior to that. Afterwards, I pretty much cut him off because I was so disgusted. I know it's minor compared to other comments, but you did ask. Story 40. Well, once after a day at work, I came home wanting to drink myself into a stupor to relax. My unemployed housemate at the time, who pulled like this all the time, had a tantrum to seek attention, claiming she had a really bad day, ringing me from upstairs saying she was going to kill herself in the bath. I didn't have the will to deal with it, so I checked that she hadn't taken any of my good knives from the kitchen that could do proper damage, then just carried on drinking. Story 41. My dad threatened to drag me from my house and force me to interact with him because I blocked his number for 3 weeks after I submitted my enrollment deposit to my state university in 2020. I had blocked my dad because he was throwing a fit that I chose my state university over an expensive university that I received a $25,000 scholarship from, but was still way more expensive than my state school that was ranked 5 spots higher than my state school at the time, as if that matters. It's funny because he didn't owe us and pay a penny for my elementary, high school or college education, Yet he thought he had the right to tell me where to go to college.